Good morning and welcome to Kunsang Pile Choling. Thank you for being here. Thank you for coming for a teaching by Jetsunma Ahkon Lhamo. And we're thrilled to be here as well. This morning's teaching is Compassion in the New Millennium. Jetsunma taught this right at the beginning in January of 2000, right after we shifted from the 1900s to the 2000s. And it's a little bit longer than most. And so enjoy, hang in there, and we'll be with you the whole time.
This videotape by Jetsunma Ahkon Lhamo was recorded live before a public audience. Jetsunma presents traditional Buddhist teachings in a contemporary way. She reaches out to us, longtime Dharma students and newcomers alike.
Well, as I've said, I'd really like to start at the beginning. And for some of you, that may mean listening to teachings that perhaps you've already had, or maybe you've had teachings that sound like this, but you haven't had them here and you haven't had them from me, so let's start. First of all, a long time ago, Lord Buddha was incarnated on the earth and became supremely realized while he was here. He is not the only being who has attained Buddhahood. He is not the only being who first became a bodhisattva, but he was there, and he was there at the birth of an aeon at his appointed time. And one of the first things that Lord Buddha taught the people of that time, now you have to remember that was 2,500, 3,000 years ago, somewhere in there. There's a debate about exactly where. At that time, try to remember the conditions under which people lived. Things were very different. There was no technology, no danger of Y2K. Thank goodness now that's over. And there was no clocks, no tickets to punch, there was no grocery store. As you know, things were very different. And also there were no medical benefits. People lived shorter lives. They lived more painful lives, more difficult lives in many ways. Not everybody was fed. Not everybody was healed. These were difficult times. And so it doesn't seem so astonishing that Lord Buddha, when he first begun to give his teachings, made his first mention, and his first venerable mention was all of samsara, and that is samsara, the wheel of death and rebirth. All of samsara is pervaded with suffering. All sentient beings are suffering. Now, when you heard that maybe 2,500 years ago, and this was at a time where there was no remedy, no sensible remedy for too many illnesses, and there were no comforts, and things were very much more difficult. There was a great deal more poverty. If a great Buddha came up to you and said, all of samsara is pervaded with suffering, all sentient beings are suffering, well, you'd go, well, yeah. You'd say, well, hell yeah. So for that period of time, that teaching went right to the heart and cut right through to where people lived and to what they needed to hear. But the problem is that nowadays, when you tell people in Sedona that all of samsara is pervaded with suffering, and that all sentient beings are suffering, they go, what a drag. And they say, well, maybe I don't like this religion. Maybe this is not joyful enough. Maybe this is not happy enough. Maybe this is wrong. Because, I mean, yesterday I had a pretty good day. And maybe for Christmas I got some pretty cool things. And, you know, I have a new car. So we think, well, that being the case, well, maybe the Buddha's lost his touch. What do you think? Maybe we should change our clothes. You see, I don't teach traditionally, don't you? So maybe the Buddha's lost his touch. We might think that. So maybe 2,500 years ago it was true that samsara was pervaded with suffering, and that all sentient beings, not just humans, but all sentient beings in all the formed and formless realms, and Lord Buddha lays them out, that all sentient beings are suffering. Well, now, when Lord Buddha taught that teaching back in India 2,500 years ago, he didn't have to stop and explain at that point. He just moved on. And everybody was ready to hear it. Because, you know, all we had to do was think about that rotten tooth in your mouth and that boil on your knee and the fact that your wife's 25 and she looks like she's 70. And, you know, I mean, it just goes on. And so suffering was pretty obvious to people of that time. But we have become civilized. And now when I say the first teaching that Lord Buddha has taught, I have to go, but listen, kids, I'll tell you. And I have to, like, do a little dance, you know. Try to be entertaining. Try to smile at the same time so you all don't get ticked off at me. Because it's not a popular idea. We have become civilized, and having become civilized, we have done many things. We have art now, we have language, we have money to count, we have healing, we have all kinds of wonderful things. We have TV. We have all kinds of amazing things going for us. And so we think to ourselves, how can it be we're not suffering like we used to? Things don't look as bad as they used to. We don't look as bad as we used to. So maybe this was true back then, and maybe it's changed now. But in fact, the Buddha's teaching does not change. Appearances change. And mainly what we've managed to do by creating this civilization, this culture, is hide suffering. When it gets a little too old, we paint it. When it doesn't smell good, we perfume it. When it dies, we put it in a box, quick. We don't allow ourselves to see the full cycle of life. If we love somebody, we try to show them only the pretty parts, whatever they are. We don't want to acknowledge that, and one of the main things that our civilization has done is to, in a way, separate us from the fullness of the awareness of what our lives are. We don't see death too much. We don't see sickness too much. I mean, the most popular way to treat sickness is to cover the pain. It's not the best way, but it's the most popular way, and that's what we're used to. And we like our religion, thank you very much, painless. So when we think the first thing the Buddha taught was all sentient beings are suffering and all samsara is pervaded with suffering, we think, what a drag, find something modern. Well, I'd like to let you in on a little secret. The good news is, yes, we do look a little better. We do feel a little better. We do live a little longer. But when Lord Buddha taught that teaching, he didn't command that there would be suffering in cyclic existence. He simply pointed out what was happening. And he taught us that here in the human realm, for instance, it's not that we don't have joy. It's not that we don't have beauty. It's not that we don't have love. We have these things, and we have them available. But Lord Buddha said, if you look a little bit deeper, you will come to understand that we also have, as part of the human realm, and as something we cannot escape, old age, sickness, and death. If you do escape old age, it's because you died first. And if you do escape sickness and just die, that's because you didn't know you were sick when you were dying. So what the Buddha taught has pretty much hung in there. It's old age, sickness, and death. And I tell you, there is nothing that makes you become more of a devotee than watching gravity do its work. Suddenly the Buddha's teaching become so in your face. So I'm really good at learning this stuff now. Maybe not 20 years ago, but now I'm pretty good at it. So we've been taught then that samsara is filled with suffering. And we are pointed out the main kinds of suffering as being old age, sickness, and death. And then beyond that, the suffering of suffering. Because suffering is something that could be fairly neutral. For the most part, it's how we suffer about that suffering that makes it the suffering it is. For instance, let me use a silly example. If I were to get down off this amazing seat and go just kick one of you in the pants, you'd have a couple of different ways that you could react to that. You could say, ow, 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 and cry and sue. Or you could say, well, you know, that happened. Or you could say, oh, there must be something there for me to learn. There's a lot of different ways you can react, but we mostly have the suffering of suffering. And that is, upon becoming aware of the conditions of samsaric existence, we suffer because of them. We react to what we perceive. And that's called the suffering of suffering. And so again, back in earlier times, it was just so darn easy to see what suffering looked like. It was very available. I mean, you throw a stone in any direction, you'd probably see somebody dead or almost there. But here we don't see our dead. We don't see our very sick. And if we do, they're made up. I mean, we make up our dead bodies. Think about that. That's what this time is. It's okay to laugh. People are going, So now we have to look in different ways. And we have to look honestly, because we have been taught to say, no, things are fine, things are fine. Everything's fine. I'm going to be all right. I'm just the way I am. And right now I'm alive, I'm good, everything's okay, I'm not getting older, at least not this very minute. I mean, really, if you look at yourself in the mirror right now, and study very hard, you will not be able to see yourself getting older. Isn't it great? But if you look at yourself in the mirror and then come back maybe a month later, you'll notice something, a little something. So it's this funny kind of delusion and yet reality that we're left with that we are never taught how to deal with. We are taught that there's some kind of pie in the sky hope. Think positive thoughts. Think that you will never die. I don't think anyone's ever managed that one yet, but if you do, let me know. You know, think positive thoughts. Think good thoughts. Think happy, happy, happy. Paint a smiley face on yourself. Pretend that there's no boogeyman. Whistle in the dark. Wait upon salvation. Or say something sweet and happy, and then salvation will surely come. We have many, many strange, I think, if you really kind of look at who we are and where we came from, strange ideas as to what religion ought to look like and what it ought to do for us. You know, you might think that because the Buddha said all sentient beings are suffering, that he was kind of a downer. I mean, what a drag. What a down head. Gee, couldn't they have found somebody more cheerful? Well, the reason why he taught that teaching is because, again, at that time, it was so obvious. And I'm here to tell you that at this time, it is so obvious also. I'm 50. It's pretty darn obvious to me. It became real obvious this year. So, the way we see it then, the way we become accustomed, the way we take in information, the way we try to understand the preceding conceptual foundation that we have, that we build our understanding on, it's all changed. It's all different. We literally live in a different world. So it is difficult for us to understand the Buddhist teaching about suffering being all-pervasive. Because we have the freedom to argue with it. I can argue with it. I could make a great case for the fact that there's as much happiness in samsara as there is unhappiness. I could make a great case for it now. You know why? Because we're sitting pretty comfortably. We've all had our dinner. Nobody looks like they're about to fall over. Some of us are a little younger, some of us are a little older, but none of us looks like we're about to keel right over. Besides, we have a doctor in the house, so it's all right. And a nurse. And me. So right now we can say, well, this is pretty good. You know, I mean, basically on some fundamental level, for the most part, we've gotten what we need today. We breathe, we eat, we take care of business, we have families maybe, we have homes, we have things that we want to, they're gettable. The things that we want, we can have. So one can make a pretty good case for the sweet life. So how does this teaching work? How do we understand then what the Buddha taught? The Buddha didn't say that happiness is not available. In fact, the Buddha said, all sentient beings are suffering. They are suffering due to the force of their karma. There is an end to suffering. And that end is enlightenment. So the Buddha was, although he gets the rap for being the downer, he's actually really the first loud voice that carried over time that said, there is a way. There is an end to suffering. But because we live in a modern civilization, we are used to hearing it different. We don't want to hear that all samsara is suffering, and if you bust your back and work really, really hard at it, and meditate, and really practice your path, and really stick to your ethics, and really practice compassion, you can get enlightenment. We don't want to hear that. We want there to be a 30-minute solution, because that's how the sitcoms are. That's really what we want. We want something quick and easy and painless. Take a pill. So, now we have to come to understand how the Buddha taught what he taught, how it is still relevant in this day and age, what he meant, and what he was trying to do for us, because he wasn't condemning us to suffering. He was saying there's a way. The problem is, in order to move through the door of enlightenment, in order to reach enlightenment, one has to face with courage, strength, and conviction the faults of cyclic existence. It's a bit like, and I've used this analogy before, and I'll probably use it a million more times because it works. It's a bit like this. Let's say you're in a room, and it's dark, and all the shades are down, and there's no way to see. And in this room, it's like any other room, like this room. There's all kinds of fixtures and furnitures and things like that. And you know, or at least maybe someone's whispered in your ear, that someday you're going to die, or someday you're going to leave this life, or maybe there's an exit or something, and you're trying to get across to that door over there. But there are no lights, and there are all these obstacles in the way. There's no way to see. The Buddha's teaching is like turning on the lights and arranging the furniture so that you can walk smoothly. It doesn't lie to you. It doesn't say, skip, hop, or jump. There's nothing in that room to scare you. The Buddha doesn't say, fly, do whatever you want. I'll be waiting at the other side. It's not what happens. The Buddha says, turn on the light. Some things you'll have to go over. Some things you'll have to go under. Some things you'll have to work on. But there is an end to suffering. And so the most amazing thing about the path is that when the Buddha gives this teaching, he said there is an end to suffering, and that end is enlightenment. And then he gives the Eightfold Path, which in our tradition, the Vajrayana tradition, is condensed into 2 accumulations. And these accumulations are wisdom, or the awareness of primordial emptiness, and knowledge, which is the knowledge of cause and effect or connecting circumstances. This is the condensation of the Eightfold Path. And in our tradition, we learn the nature of all things being emptiness. We learn connecting karmas. We learn interdependent origins. We learn cause and effect relationships because we have to change some stuff. Further, the Buddha went on to say that on a fundamental level, we are all the same. Absolutely the same. There are no high masters and little guys. There are no great beings and not so great beings. There are people who have done practice and have traveled the path a little longer, and people who are just getting started. There are people in the middle, and there are sentient beings with all kinds of capacities. But on one fundamental level, we are exactly the same. And this is what the Buddha has taught. The Buddha has said, the one thing that all sentient beings have in common, from the meanest, lowest worm that you could step on, to the most avant-garde, fabulous, multidimensional, New Age person you've ever seen. We all have one thing in common. We all wish to be happy. Everything wishes to be happy. All beings, even when you, by looking at them, there's no way you can tell they're trying to be happy. I mean, I have friends that when you look at their actions, you'd think they were trying to kill themselves. You'd think that they were trying to destroy their very lives. But I know they want to be happy. And then you think about animals, you know, I mean, the greatest suffering of an animal is their fear. There are 2 kinds of animals. There are the predators and there are the prey. And the cycle goes round and round. And the cycle of fear continues, continues, continues. But even those animals, whether they are prey or predator, they want to be happy. Murderers want to be happy. Now you look at somebody that's like a serial killer and does all that bizarre stuff that you see on, you know, Discovery Channel and investigative reports. Ooh, I love that stuff. You see all that serial killer stuff, and you think, what is, I don't understand. What is this? Well, what the Buddha is saying is that this person may be killing one after another, may be torturing, may be stealing, may be maiming, may be living a horrible life. But through some twisted logic, through some fundamental lack of understanding, this person is simply trying to be happy. This is true of a robber, of a killer, of a rapist. It's true of chainsaw murderer, anybody. They're all trying to be happy, but the problem is, and this is what the Buddha has also taught, sentient beings do not understand the causes of happiness. Now think about that. We do not understand the causes of happiness, or what makes happiness, or what can make us happy. You think that's true, that we don't understand how to be happy? Well, I have a suggestion. Thank you for the nod. I appreciate that. There's an honest person in this room. A doctor, a nurse, and an honest person. Do we have a lawyer? Well, that wouldn't work well. So, is it true that we don't know how to be happy? Or we don't understand what makes us happy? Now think about anybody's life that you know. Almost anybody. Almost anybody. We can watch almost anybody try to get more love. Now how do they do it? How do people try to get love? How do people try to get noticed? How do people try to get attention? How do people try to get some love? Well, there's a lot of different ways. They wheedle, they manipulate, they whine, they look pitiful, they beg, they try giving you presents, they steal your phone number. There are so many ways in which people try to get love, and really what they're trying to do there is be happy. But what most of us don't understand, and what the Buddha has taught, is that by whining and being needy, grasping, gimme, that, strangely enough, is not the cause of happiness. Can you believe it? Our whole lives we do the mantra, gimme, what's mine? And what's yours too? You just say it. Say our mantra. And we say it our whole lives and we wonder why. Why do I feel so empty? Why do I hurt? Why isn't this working out for me? What's wrong with you that you don't love me the way you should? Then we get pissed off. So it kind of happens like that, and we don't realize. Well, let me ask you then. Let's have you realize, when you see somebody doing the need thing, the gimme thing, the hole you can't fill up thing, the endless thing, does it make you inclined to live, love, and give more? Not really. Not really. It makes it difficult. It makes it difficult. And the person who's trying to get your love, really working at it now, you got to give me for effort. They are working at it. So the person who's working at trying to get your love does not understand that by being more and more grasping, they are creating literally more and more non-virtuous quality to the mind. And they are alienating themselves from happiness more and more and more. Okay, what about poverty? Okay, we think to ourselves, and I get the poverty thing. My family was on welfare when I was a kid, so I get the whole poverty thing. And we think, well, okay, well, now I think I do want to be happy. Okay, the Buddha was right about that, but I don't think he understands that I do know how to get happiness. I'm going to go make some. And so we try to get prosperity. And for some of us, maybe we can manipulate things around and it works. But oftentimes, those very most prosperous people don't feel prosperous at all. They still feel alienated, lonely, unloved, unwanted, and impoverished. I know people like that. And then maybe you manage to pull a few bucks together and somehow it doesn't buy what you need. You can't buy what you need. Or perhaps you are one of those less fortunate people who try very hard to make money. And no matter what you do, you can't make any. It just doesn't happen. And so in our minds we think, try harder, try harder. What about the dream? Get those books, get those sales guys and all those magical things they say. Yeah, get some muscle going. We think that that's what we have to do to get more happy. So we think positive and push till we are obsessed. And maybe we get a little money, maybe we don't, but we don't feel much better. We just don't feel much better. And so what the Buddha would say about that is, again, here's the case of a sentient being trying to obtain happiness. But really, it's not that we're lazy or shiftless. We try real hard. But we don't know what causes happiness. And so upon entering onto the Buddhist path, we have to learn a whole new set of connecting circumstances, cause and effect relationships. Because this is one thing that the Buddha has taught very succinctly and very clearly. The idea of linear time, the idea of duality and the way that we see ourselves moving through time and through life, that's all an illusion. In fact, cause and effect relationships arise not only together, not only simultaneously, but interdependently. Cause and effect relationships arise interdependently. That means if let's use that same analogy, if I get off this throne and kick somebody in the tail, well, nothing may happen right then. Maybe it'll be all right. Maybe that person will say, well, okay, you kicked me in the tail. And maybe I'll climb back up here and I'll continue the teaching and nothing will happen. But in the future, because I created a cause, there will be a result. The result is already there. You just can't see it. Our biggest problem is time, because we see causes, but we don't see results connecting. You see? So it's very hard to understand why suffering happens and why I don't know how to get happiness, or why we don't know how to get happiness. So it's very, very hard to understand. Then the Buddha lays down something which, hey, back 2,500 years ago, if he would have said, eat rocks and spit them out of your ears, then the suffering will end. I think people would have tried it, because there was so much suffering. But now, when we hear what the Buddha actually taught as an antidote to suffering, we go, backpedal, start doing the moonwalk backwards. Because it isn't what we wanted to hear. See, the Buddha teaches really weird things like, if you're lonely, the answer is not to go up to somebody and say, please, love me. Or to make yourself as appealing or as beautiful as possible, or to buy people presents until they relent, or, whatever it is that you think you have to do. The Buddha said that if you feel that your life is loveless, then be the source of love for all beings. Don't think about getting. Don't be doing the gimme gimme mantra. Turn it around and provide love for others. If we are experiencing a life of loneliness, the Buddha teaches us, be a friend or be someone that one can depend on. Be steadfast. Be loving and kind and concerned. That this will produce the eventual result of friendship, of people caring for you. In my life, I sometimes think, well, it depends on what day you're talking to me, but I sometimes think I am the most fortunate of beings, and one reason is that no matter what happens to me, and it's not that terrible things don't happen, it happens to us all. I have so many people around me that would do anything, that love me and care for me, and really would do anything to put a smile on my face. And sometimes I look at these people and I think, what's with you guys? Why are you doing this? But I know it's not certainly because of my qualities in this lifetime. I can't count for it now. It seems to me that in the past I must have created some virtue that resulted in this result. That's the only thing I can think of. It must be so. So in my mind, and even in my mind, these teachings that the Buddha has taught are true. But then I've also tried experiments in my own life. Does this really work? At times when I felt low, maybe I felt low because someone has abandoned me or betrayed me or taken their love away from me. I found the answer was to stick to it, to keep loving no matter what. And guess what? It works. It does. It really works. Well, it's not that I'm so great, it's that I tried the whining and all that other stuff and it didn't work. So I thought, well, I've tried everything else, might as well love. So you see, this is my method for us to talk as though we're old friends and we're family and we know each other. But the lessons there are the same. This is what the Buddha has taught. Now, this is another thing I'm going to tell you that's not going to be too popular in Sedona. The Buddha says, never go to psychics. It's pointless. The Buddha said to go to a psychic is pointless because you can learn, and they charge too much. And he said, no, that was my insert. He said, if you want to know about your past, look at your life today. Look in the mirror. Do you have friends? Or do people care for you? Do you have enough? Are you content? Well, if not, the Buddha lays out the antidotes for all these things. He says, whatever it is that you want, you have the power to make that come true if you apply the proper antidote. Supposing, let's say, that your body is not fit. Supposing that you have a lot of difficulty with your body and it doesn't hold up for you. It doesn't do what you need for it to do. It's not fit. Or supposing you would like to be more attractive. Let's say you look at yourself and you go, no. Or, you don't feel that you are as beautiful as you would like to be. You really aspire to have some kind of beauty. Well, the Buddha said, if your body and your appearance are not what you want them to be, then there is some karmic playing out taking place, where perhaps sometimes in the past, perhaps we did not care for the bodies of others. Perhaps we did not care for the bodies of our children. Perhaps we did not care for the bodies of our beloveds. Perhaps we did not care for our own bodies. Perhaps when others were sick in the past, and I don't mean necessarily this lifetime, perhaps when others were sick in the past, we did not provide comfort. We did not provide healing. We did not provide hope and help for them. And so now in this lifetime, we see that our bodies are not strong and our appearances are not perfect. Perhaps in the past, we were not able to hold vows with our bodies. From the simplest vows of marriage vows to the vows of ordination. And so with our bodies, we committed some non-virtue. Or concerning the body of some other, we committed some non-virtue. Not necessarily in this lifetime. We live in, we're probably pretty nice people now. But it pays to look and see that what the Buddha taught is correct. And so the Buddha says that if you want to create the causes for future health, for future well-being, even for future beauty, we're told it's not, you're not supposed to ask for beauty. You're not supposed to want any of that. Hey, you can get anything you want if you pay for it. That's just how it is. And you pay for it with your qualities. That's how it works. So, let's say In this lifetime, the body is weak, or there's some ongoing chronic sickness, or maybe not as beautiful as you had hoped it would be. Maybe not as strong in some way. So the Buddha teaches that what we should do then is to do all that we can to provide for the health, strength, and well-being of others. If we want to be well, we should find a way to help the healing of others. If we can do it with our own two hands, maybe a soothing touch or a cold compress or, whatever we can do with our own hands or bodies. Or perhaps a kind word or just some sympathy, or perhaps giving someone the money to take treatment, or providing transportation for someone to take treatment. By doing this, we are creating the causes for future physical strength and beauty. Makeup doesn't do it. I know, I've tried. I mean, it helps a little bit. Don't look as bad as you do when you first wake up in the morning, but it's not it. So then, what if we look in the mirror? Again, we haven't gone to the psychic this week. We're looking in the mirror. So we look in the mirror, and we discover that, we've been working for how many years now, right? Job, 9 to 5, or whatever our version of this is. And so far, we're still not wealthy. We're still not even that comfortable. Many of us still borrowing from one to pay the other, living hand to mouth, that kind of thing. So the Buddha teaches us that in order to overcome obstacles like that, getting 2 jobs would not necessarily be the solution. Finding a rich man would not be the solution. Because after that comes divorce with rich man. That is not the solution. So what is the solution? Lord Buddha taught us to simply behold, for instance, the image of either our precious teachers or the 3 precious jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Those objects that are venerable, those objects that mean to us the mind of enlightenment. To take a simple flower or a handful of rice, to visualize the deities in front of oneself, to visualize that which represents the mind of enlightenment in front of oneself, and to make a mindful offering, not like here's some rice, but a truly mindful offering with fervent regard. To make even the offering of the smallest flower to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, or to the source of one's spiritual teaching. To do so with deep absorption and with faith is to be reborn in samadhi. Now, samadhi's not like south of Cottonwood. Samadhi is a state of bliss and peace. It is a state of non-attachment. It is a state of non-suffering. It is our nature when we shovel the crap out. Our nature is bliss. And so when the obstacles to that bliss are removed, then our nature is revealed. So we are taught then as Buddhists to make offerings at every available option. Excuse me, I wasn't born in Tibet. I would like to design one with a, one of those stairs that climbs, what do you call those things? Escalator. And then my feet can come out that way. Oh. Anyway, keeping with tradition. Where was I? We were suffering in samsara somewhere. Where were we? Samadhi, right, samadhi. So we were talking about samadhi not being south of Cottonwood, and samadhi being like the natural state of non-attachment, non-duality, the bliss state that is our natural state. So how can we do that? How can we offer a flower and expect that samadhi will result? I mean, I've offered flowers before, you know. And the electric company and the gas company, they still know where I live, you know. Well, here's the way we should understand that. The only magic, that is to say, that which appears spontaneously and naturally, is the bodhicitta, which is the expression or display of our primordial empty nature. That is the only thing that appears spontaneously and naturally and is always complete. Every time we make an offering of a flower, of a grain of rice, of a visualization, you know, in Buddhism we are taught to visualize the entire world as a celestial palace mandala with all of the jewels and foods and good things and perfect things and everything that's in it transformed into celestial substance and offered to the three precious jewels so that we would practice having non-attachment, so that we would practice having a good heart and making offerings without holding back. This is the way to bliss because it is the way to reveal our nature. It is the way that our nature is shown. A little bit like cleaning off dirty glass so that the sun can shine through, in a sense. That's an okay analogy, but it'll work for now. So, supposing you were to take your personality. Let's not judge your personality. That's not what we're here to do. That's another religion. So we're not judging. Let's take your personality. You have characteristics, don't you? Habits? Lots of habits. Yeah. We know about habitual tendency. So we have lots of habits and we have lots of conditions and we have lots of ways that, you know, that are, that's how people recognize us. We are a certain way. Supposing we were to practice a path that little by little teaches us, instead of whenever you want something, to whine about it, or to grasp about it, or to buy it, or to talk your husband into giving it to you, or whatever our little trick is. Supposing if we were to feel a lack of something, that instead of all that, of continuing those non-virtuous mental habituations. Anybody want to write that down? Non-virtuous mental habituations that are our personality. Instead, we would make offerings. Now, this is what the Buddha has taught. You have the power to turn it around. Your salvation is not in anybody else's hands but yours, not mine. Nobody up in the sky. Nobody down under. Your salvation is like a precious jewel that you carry in your hand. And the Buddha teaches you that if you understand the connection between cause and effect, if you do the math, if you get the 2 and 2 always makes 4, no matter how you jerk it around. If you get that if you do this, you'll get that result. And if you do the other thing, you'll get this result. You'll begin to understand that you are the director. And you have the power to change your own habituation, no matter what it looks like. Now, these traits that we have, the ones that make us beg for love, or grasp for love, or whine for love, or pay for love, or whatever it is that we do, whatever, you know, these are nothing more than cultural and personal habitual tendencies. In the same way that a cat's natural instinct is to chase something, even if it's a dust mote. Because in the wild, a cat's instinct is to chase kill, and eat. And the reason why is through the habituation of that species. Again and again and again, over time, it imprints in genetics. So we have the same situation. Our habitual tendencies are still with us, not only from this lifetime, so unfortunately we don't get to blame Ma and Pa anymore. It's not only from this lifetime, but from since time out of mind. Since the first idea of self-nature being inherently real. And that for us was an inconceivable time ago. We have visible and invisible habitual tendencies that are driving our ship, running, steering the ship. So the Buddha teaches us, learn the math. Learn that in order to overcome the obstacle of loneliness, you must give more love. There is no other solution. You must stop waiting for love to come to you from space. Whether you think the aliens are going to do it or the guy next door. Love comes into one's life when one practices it. And if you view in your life the obstacle of poverty, and you feel that there is not enough prosperity and depth and wealth and riches in your life, start giving. I actually have used that myself, and I've seen that it works. And it's not that goody two-shoes kind of, I give you $1 and it'll come back 10. No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about heart. In the heart. When you see a person who has less than you, see if there isn't something you can do. Give away some of your stuff. You may not have a lot of money, but you got a lot of stuff. I give away my stuff all the time. We have stuff sales. No. You have to find a way to incorporate a deep-hearted, juicy, for real generosity. And it's got to be real juicy. I mean, you have to be there with it. You can't just say, oh, I'm giving my $1 so I can have my 10. Enjoy it. That's not how it works. You have to begin to cultivate the mind of generosity, the mind of kindness. This is what brings prosperity into our lives. My experience has been that those people who are truly generous and have been so for a long time, not only with their money, but with their hearts, with their minds, with their time, with their hands, with their stuff, whatever it takes. That those people who have been generous and consistently so are well loved. And not just because of what they can give, because we can see them. We can see their hearts. And if you find yourself stuck in a terrible place, and don't be ashamed, that's how it is. We're human. As well as being the Buddha nature, we are also human. Supposing we find ourselves in a tight space, so we can't make ends meet. We can't make it happen. Our lives don't flow easily. It's really tough. We don't have what we need. We don't have a lot of stuff. Do you believe the wisest, smartest, best, and coolest thing that you could possibly do is to start right now being a generous person? If you have 2 cents, give up 1 of them. Don't think about what's coming back to you. Give it because it feels good. It's that mind of generosity. It is that heart of love that magnetizes the kind of vibrational quality in our life that is an exact display of those tendencies. And who knows, sometimes we have to operate completely on faith, and this is another thing the Buddha teaches. The Buddha teaches that we have to be kind without expectation. And here's the reason why. We have been absorbed in ourselves and our own needs since we first recognized ourselves as selves. Because the first thing we did when we saw self was to say, oh, if I'm self, that must be other. And if that's other, I don't think I like it. Or maybe I want it. Maybe it should come here right now. That's kind of the way that we are. Just seeing self-nature, we evaluate everything else according to us and our needs. Supposing, like the Buddha teaches, we have had uncountable lifetimes in all different forms, really even unrecognizable forms. The Buddha has taught us that we have had life after life. If you go to a psychiatrist and they say you've been born 10 times, leave. Life after life after life. Oh, grab the money before you do, and then leave. Maybe give her some of it. The Buddha has taught us that since time out of mind, we have believed in our own self-nature to be inherently real, and therefore everything is understood in relationship to self-nature. So now we are trying to change our lives. What if it happens that, well, first of all, we start healing everybody we can get our hands on. You know, we start helping people and healing people, and we cross people that don't even want to cross, and we do all kinds of stuff. But try to stick to the people that want your help. And then we get really, really generous, and we start really sharing our stuff and sharing our time, sharing our hearts, sharing our sympathy, sharing our compassion. We're giving. Our life makes a difference. And then about maybe a couple of years later, you go and look in the mirror, doesn't look any better. Was the Buddha wrong? No. First of all, we have been involved in this ego cherishing since time out of mind. Look, guys, it could take a while, you know? I mean, it took us how many years to get into this shape? Could take a while. Or how many lifetimes to get into this shape? Could take a while. And the best way to do this is with the absorption of compassion. We don't do this expecting result. We don't give like this, you know, giving with one hand and taking with the other. That's not the point. There's not much result there. Anyone could do that. You don't have to be a practitioner to do that. Sometimes it just takes time. Then there are other cases in which something happens that's so miraculous that you yourself can't even realize it. I mean, you may look like the same person to yourself in the mirror after 2 years of really conscientious practice. But the people around you are going to say, isn't she different? There's something, I don't know, beautiful about him. There's something just irresistible. Like you want to be next to that person. You just want to be in their field of energy. You want to drink the peace that they have in their mind. So to other people, they see something beautiful. Beautiful. And I guarantee you, every time I see a monk or a nun dressed in the robes of the Buddha, keeping their vows purely, I feel so happy because I know that in some future time, they will be irresistibly beautiful. Beautiful to the eyes, beautiful to behold, breathtaking, charismatic. You just want to be next to them because they have worn the robes of the Buddha. And someday they will be able to offer that beauty and that sense of their nature to beings, and it will be like celestial medicine because they have kept vows. So these are the things that the Buddha has taught. It is within all of our capacity to create the causes for happiness. Now, if we live in the expectation of gimme and try to practice kindness at the same time, well, it doesn't work really, because the mind can really only concentrate on one thing at a time. It may go back and forth between things, but really, we only concentrate on one thing at a time. And while we're looking for what we're getting, we're not giving very much. Or we're looking for the return. There's not much being given. And the Lamas always say that a sentient being who is giving in order to get, that giving has a little hook on the end of it. It's like an invisible hook. It goes in, and it brings something back. You know? And so the way to turn the unhappiness around is to give as though the person or the being or the situation that you were given to were your own dear child, or your own beloved mother or father. The Buddha has taught us that we have been alive so many times that everyone whose name we can pronounce and who we can see with our eyes has at one time or another been our own kind mother, has at one time or another given us milk. How amazing, isn't it? So now we are taught in our spiritual maturity that the path is to recognize that and to begin to pay back that kindness. We think of all sentient beings as our kind mothers. All sentient beings as being so close to our heart, whether we like the way they act or not. I mean, they can be meaner than snake piss. Do snakes pee? I don't know anything about snakes. Do they? I don't know. But even if the person that you're trying to be kind to is meaner than snake piss, you think at one time, well, this person's trying to be happy. They obviously are not too keen on how. They obviously haven't figured out the big picture yet. But they have, at some point or another, been our own kind mother. We have to find a way to return that kindness. And so the Buddha teaches further. The Buddha teaches what kindness actually is. We're going another step further here. Supposing we say, okay, I'm playing, I'm in. I want to be rich and beautiful in my next life. Actually, what I meant to say was, I'd like to make this world a better place. So, okay, I'm in, I'm playing. I'm here. So the Buddha teaches us that there are two kinds of compassion. Two kinds of what we call traditionally bodhicitta, which means the awakening mind. Bodhicitta is the first and only appearance or movement of the primordial wisdom, empty nature that is our nature. So there are two kinds of compassion, two kinds of appearance of bodhicitta. And the Buddha teaches us that we should practice both of them. And so I would like to briefly lay them out for you so that you have something to do until I see you the next time. And hopefully that will be next month. So there are two kinds of bodhicitta, or two kinds of compassion. One is ordinary or practical bodhicitta, or compassion. Ordinary or practical bodhicitta, or compassion, is made up of, is comprised of those things which can be found in samsara, in the world of death and rebirth that we live in. So any kindness, any generosity that you give that is based on things of the world, that comes from the world, is called practical or ordinary bodhicitta. And that goes from, if I were to give you $1, that would be ordinary bodhicitta. It's a kindness, I mean, if you needed it, but it's ordinary bodhicitta. Now let's think of a really extreme example. Let's say I suddenly got really incredibly rich. And now let's say I could feed everybody in all the impoverished countries and all the impoverished places on this earth from now until their death. Well, I mean, you know, anyone in their right mind would say, yeah, that is incredible. That's like unthinkable wealth. That's unthinkable that one can do that. But according to the Buddha's teaching, that is ordinary compassion. Because we are taking ordinary things in the world, like food and money, that can be gotten from the world, if you play the right game. And they will solve worldly problems. They will feed these people until they die. Will it keep them from getting old? No. Will it keep them from getting sick? No. But I could feed them till they die. But here's what I learned, is that unless I practice the path, I have no way to practice the other kind of bodhicitta, which is extraordinary or ultimate bodhicitta. How does one practice extraordinary or ultimate bodhicitta? Well, let me tell you how I found out I didn't know how to do it without practicing the path. I had kids. And when one of my, well, you know, if you've had kids, you know, when you have your first one, it's a very life-changing experience, and there's these, you're obsessed with these fingers and toes and all these, you know, things that happen to you that change you. Baby's fingers and toes, not yours. Make sure. So when you have a newborn baby, it changes you, and it makes you all sappy, and you start calling trains choo-choos, and, you know, you're all sappy and kind of weird and silly. So I was sappy one day when I had my child, and I was loving him, really just loving him, just rocking him and loving him. And I was just so moved because he was beautiful and he was mine, and I just, you know how that stuff goes. And I was all emotional, and I said to him, I promise you, no harm will come to you. I will make sure that there is no pain. You will never hurt. Wait a minute. And then I realized I was lying. I was realizing I couldn't make that promise. I can't promise even this child that I would lay down and die for. I can't promise this child that he'll be happy. I can't promise this child that he'll have enough. I mean, I know he's always going to have a roof over his head and food in his mouth while I'm on the earth to get it for him, but I can't follow this child through his death into his next life. I can't make sure his next rebirth is an auspicious one. And it occurred to me, what the hell kind of mother am I? And then I realized that one has to practice the path, and one has to practice being motherly towards all sentient beings, having that same care towards all sentient beings. And one has to offer somehow the ultimate, extreme, extraordinary bodhicitta. And that is the bodhicitta that arises from the Buddha nature, from that primordial wisdom nature that is our Buddha nature. If it arises from that, like bodhicitta, it will result in the end of suffering. So food and houses and stuff like that we can get from the world, and we can give it to worldly people. The equation stays within samsara. Do you see what I'm saying? To give ultimate or extraordinary bodhicitta, one has to be able to give something that results in the end or cessation of suffering, all suffering. And what did the Buddha teach was the end of suffering? Enlightenment. So in order to bring about the suffering of all sentient beings, in order to appear in every future life, in order to give them what technology they need, in order to be free, in order to be free of suffering, in order to appear as their teacher, in order to appear as their mother, in order to be able to keep that promise, in order to follow them into the bardo and teach them how to exit their bodies properly and to be reborn in an auspicious life, ready to practice Dharma immediately. In order to do that, one has to offer ultimate bodhicitta, which is the path. To end the suffering of all sentient beings, we must teach them generosity, contemplation, prayerfulness, mindfulness, clarity. We must free them from delusion, selfishness, self-cherishing, because clearly one is a method that brings us closer and closer to our nature, and another is a method that brings us closer and closer to unhappiness. And so we develop the mind and the sensibilities of an awakening Buddha called a bodhisattva. And we begin to practice this kind of kindness, both ordinary kindness and ultimate kindness. And the only way that one can practice ultimate kindness is to practice the path oneself, to reach enlightenment or to reach realization to the degree that we can offer the path to others, so that they too might be free of suffering. In closing, I would like to read you a passage. This is a book called The Sublime Path of the Victorious Ones, and it's a book of Mahayana prayers. But actually, this particular prayer that I would like to read comes from another book called The Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. And since this is your first day as Bodhisattva, here's how you start. This book, this reading to me has always been very precious, has always helped me when I needed it, has always filled me up when I was on empty. And so I'd like to share it with you for that reason. This is the thinking of a bodhisattva, or a Buddha who walks among us. This is the thinking of one who practices the path in order to be of benefit to all sentient beings. It's called Stabilizing in the Bodhi Mind. In the spiritual energy that relieves the anguish of beings in misery and places depressed beings in eternal joy, I lift up my heart and rejoice. In the goodness-producing illumination, I lift up my heart and rejoice. I rejoice in the beings who have gained eternal liberation from suffering, and I rejoice in those attuned to Buddhahood, as well as in their offspring, the noble bodhisattvas. In the ocean-like virtue of the Bodhi mind that brings joy to all beings, and in accomplishing the well-being of others, I lift up my heart and rejoice. To the Buddhas of the 10 directions, I join my hands in respect. Let blaze the light of Dharma's truth for the beings lost in darkness. To the Buddhas considering parinirvana, I join my hands in prayer. Do not abandon the beings in sorrow, but remain and teach for countless ages. May any spiritual energy thus generated by my devotion to the enlightened ones be dedicated to dispelling the misery of living beings without exception. As long as diseases afflict living beings, may I be the doctor, the medicine, and also the nurse who restores them to health. May I fall as a rain to increase the harvest that must feed the living beings in ages of dire famine. May I myself serve as food and drink. May I be an unending treasury for those desperate and forlorn. May I manifest as what they require and wish to have near them. My body, every possession, and all goodness, past, present, and future, without remorse, I dedicate to the well-being of the world. Suffering is transcended by total surrender, and the mind attains to nirvana. As one day all must be given up, why not dedicate it now to universal happiness? My bodily powers I dedicate to the well-being of all that lives. Should anyone wish to kill, abuse, or beat me, the responsibility is purely their own. Should anyone wish to ridicule me and make of me an object of jest or scorn, why should I possibly care if I have dedicated myself to others? Let them do as they wish with me, so long as it does not harm them. May no one who encounters me ever have an insignificant contact, regardless of whether those whom I meet respond toward me with anger or faith. May the mere fact of our meeting contribute to the fulfillment of their wishes. May the slander, harm, and all forms of abuse that anyone should direct toward me act as a cause of their enlightenment. May I be a protector of the helpless, a guide to those traveling the path, a boat to those wishing to cross over, or a bridge or a raft. May I be a land for those requiring it, a lamp for those in darkness. May I be a home for the homeless and a servant to the world. May I be a protector of the helpless, a guide to those traveling the path, a boat to those wishing to cross over, or a bridge or a raft. May I be a land for those requiring it, a lamp for those in darkness. May I be a home for the homeless and a servant to the world. In order to fulfill the needs of beings, may I be as a magic gem, an inexhaustible vase, a mystic spell, a cure-all medicine, and a wish-granting tree. May I act as the mighty earth, or like the free and open skies, to support and provide the space whereby I and all others may grow. Until every being afflicted by pain has reached to nirvana's shores, may I serve only as a condition that encourages progress and joy. Just as all previous Buddhas first give rise to the precious Bodhi mind, and just as they then carefully follow the stages of the Bodhisattva disciples, likewise for the sake of all living beings, do I now myself generate the Bodhi mind, and likewise will I myself train in the disciplines of a Bodhisattva. So these are the words of the Buddhas. These words are ancient, old, and true, and no matter what advice you have ever been given, or what you've read, what you've been told, any of it, this is the advice to follow. I tell you from my heart, if you were my child, I would not tell you different, that to love and to give is the way to happiness, and there is no other route. And these are the ways of the Bodhisattva. The moment we conceptualize that idea, the moment we conceive of it, we have entered onto the first level of the Bodhisattva. The moment we take the vow to be of benefit to all beings, that moment we have set our foot upon the path. And so from my heart, as though I were your mother, I'm telling you, put your foot on that path and walk it. At the end is the door to liberation. So I thank you very much for coming tonight. We're just about on time to stop now.
Sure.